All right. Well, thanks for everybody for joining me today. My name is Tommy Cooksey. I'm a trainer for Simba Chain. I'm going to be here teaching you a little bit about our product, talking a little bit about how you might be able to use some of the products that Simba Chain's developed in order to be able to maybe make that lifting that you're doing here at the hackathon a little bit easier. So what we try to do is maybe remove a lot of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, learning Geth and MetaMask and all that kind of stuff. We want to kind of try to make some of that a little bit easier for you. So before I get into actually showing you our product, let's just kind of take a brief look a little bit about Simba Chain, a little bit about where we're at with blockchain, and then we're going to go in and take a look at our product. So when we think of Simba Chain, before we get into it, really a little bit about myself. My name again is Tommy Cooksey. I'm a master trainer. What that means is I've been teaching for a long time IT technology. I got started back in the 90s teaching Marines how to do fun things with the computer. So anyway, I'm a Marine by trade and of course by training. And so been out of the Marine Corps since the 90s, but again, that's where I got my start in IT. So anyway, with that being said, I've been teaching pretty much ever since then, things like PeopleSoft and cryptography and blockchain and web and cloud technology and things like that. So I'm a trainer by trade. So what we're going to be doing with Simba Chain is we're going to be showing you how you can use our tooling in order to take your product or your idea and turn it into a real world product that you can actually see a solution. So we call it simple blockchain or simpler blockchain in applications. And so anybody with a good idea can build an application. So you can go to a proof of concept to a real world app in just a matter of hours or even just you can build out a proof of concept in just a matter of hours and not just a few months or years. And so again, it's simpler blockchain applications. It makes it easy to build out stuff. If you're not familiar with our background, I encourage you to take a look at that. We don't really have time to get into that today, but we're not an ICO type of blockchain company. We're actually backed by venture capital, but we got started with seeding in the United States government in that they did what's called a small business innovation research grant for DoD and DARPA was doing secure messaging, and so Simba won that grant and then decided to use that same technology in order to start building out the company. So anyway, what we're able to do is we're able to kind of just take a look at your existing business process and then figure out where do you have value there that you need to track or state changes that you need to track. Figure out what kind of transactions are making those state changes, build an API for that, and then figure out what you're going to be putting on or off chain. So with that being said, we have a lot of pieces when we think of IT pieces around today. A lot of times people will say that we're kind of moving into that fourth industrial revolution, or it's Web 3.0. And smart contracts are kind of driving a blockchain 2.0 kind of functionality. But what we find is that a lot of times we got to be able to make all these pieces that we see that are actually causing disruption in technology. How do we get these pieces to fit together, right? So how do we make all this stuff fit together? And I kind of equate that to, if we think back to the bicycle, back in the early 1800s, the bicycle was invented in 1817 by Baron Karl von Drais. And it didn't have any pedals. They actually called it the hobby horse, right? And it was a hobbyist thing, right? It was used by hobbyists in order to try to figure out a different method of transportation than riding on a live animal or using some type of a live animal to do that, or steam power or something. So the modern bicycle kind of really was a revolutionary, where it was safer. It had pedals, it had brakes, it had a steering wheel that actually worked, and it wasn't any big revolutionary idea. It was just a matter of putting all these parts that were already there together and figure out how they worked appropriately. And so I think that's kind of what's happening in IT right now. And so and one of the things that we find traditionally as a pain point in IT is we have to mitigate the risk, right? The risk of trust. And we heard the previous speaker, Dr. Buzek, speak about trust and mitigating trust. And that's really important, especially in a decentralized application or a decentralized network. And so with a blockchain, by its inherent design, it's going to be decentralized in some way, shape, or form, or distributed. And so, so with that being said, how do we mitigate that trust in a decentralized manner? We normally have to do that with some type of cryptography. We use digital signatures and digital ownerships and wrist and you know, I heard people talk about David Chaum yesterday. But yeah, you know, we look back to, you know, to those great algorithms that we constantly use. We don't roll our own crypto. We use those standard algorithms in order to prove the state of something. And so that's where the immutable ledger and the state changes come in. And so when we layer smart contracts on top of that, then we're just putting in essence, a set of rules that define how our transactions, or the laws that govern how those transactions are going to be enforced, right? And so, so when we look at the traditional model, like, so here, you know, this is what we see, you know, in a traditional Web 3-tier model. We got our front end, back end, or excuse me, front end, middle tier, back end, right? So the front end is our web servers, and their pain point there, of course, is thumbs and screens, right? So how do we get the data in and out, right? What's the inputs? What's the outputs? And how do we mitigate that problem? Well, we do that with alternate reality or virtual reality, or we use ubiquitous computing. We're already seeing that disruption, right? That's happening right now, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve the blockchain, but it could. And then in the middle layer, we have AI. We have machine learning that is replacing those static algorithms that we would constantly be using, that were making the decisions on the data that came in, right? So the data came in, we had to make some choices about that data, and we had some different inferences that maybe would be referenced. And so how do we modify those inferences? How do we make real-time state changes so that we're making the correct choices real time? And that's where machine learning comes in. That's where AI comes in. And that's where, you know, we use a lot of fun tools in order to change those static algorithms that we're using traditionally. So we're seeing disruption here, right? So we're seeing disruption there. We're seeing disruption here. And then what's happening here on the back end? This is what we're all concentrating on this week, is the blockchain. But the blockchain on the back end is in essence an immutable ledger that's just been distributed amongst a set of peers. And then we're all just using those cryptographic primitives to prove the state of the data, or the assertions that are in those blocks. And so what we're doing in essence is we're looking at our traditional data set that was on a database or relational database management system. And we're like, okay, we got to separate this. We got to say some of this data has to be immutable, and we have to have an immutable state that we can track and trace. And that immutable state needs to be the part of the data that is the contextual data. The structural data, that's okay. That can be ephemeral. That can just go back to its state, whatever. But the contextual data, the individual transactions that are occurring and the state changes that occur in those transactions, it's going to be important that we keep track of that. And why is that so important? Because that's what's driving Web 3. Okay, so when we think of Web 1, let's just take a brief look back at what happened, you know, with Web 1 and Web 2 and then Web 3. Web 1 was all about consumption, right? We were consuming stuff. Information was out there. We needed to get it. And then we became our own publishers. We could publish information easily, quickly, make it available, but it wasn't ours. It was the platform that we published it on. So when we put stuff on YouTube, we put stuff on Facebook, we put stuff on Twitter, it belongs to the platform. It doesn't necessarily belong to us, and the platform can ban us. There's inherent risks that are involved in that. So we don't like that, right? As a consumer, as a participant, as an actor in the system, we want to have more control of our data. So how can we do that? Well, if we can start to have row-level data ownership, which you can do with cryptographic signatures, you can do this with key management, and you can do this with in a distributed manner, so that you can kind of adhere to governance. So with that, the blockchain is in essence fixing a lot of those pain points that we traditionally had on the back end, right? And so, you know, those things like distributed immutability, cryptographic data, and anonymity, autonomy, transparency in transactions, all of those things are traditional pain points that we see, in any architecture that can somewhat be alleviated or addressed with these different tooling. So as we see that happen, that's what Web3 is. If we go back to the bicycle concept, it's just like that, just putting all those pieces together and figuring out how can we do this better, right? And we can do this better. We can do this a lot better. And so what we're going to do is we're going to focus as Simba on just looking at the things that is an asset, what holds value, and what's going to be something that would make a state change to that thing that would modify that value in some way, maybe add, digress, maybe ascertain the value exists, whatever. And so that is a transaction. And so we make it easy for you to do that. And that generates a smart contract that will then allow you to start interacting with it and testing it and see if it works in your environment. So when you think of a wireframing tool for blockchain, I don't think there's one out there that's better than our .com tool, which is what I'm going to demo for you today. So I got about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to finish up with these slides, and then we're going to do a demo for about the last 15 minutes, and hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions you guys might have. But just real simple, if you guys don't know what a smart contract is, it's just additional logic that we're putting on top of the immutable ledger of a blockchain that allows us to make it more Turing complete, right? So that's what Ethereum did, is it was that Turing complete virtual machine that ran on top of a blockchain that created the ability to have smart contracts. And so we're going to focus on that really for the rest of this conversation. So a lot of times when I talk about smart contracts, I like to equate it to electricity. And, when you think about electricity, people think, oh, well, electricity, the first use of electricity was a light bulb. Not really. No, Samuel Morse invented the telegraph way before the light bulb was ever invented. And so, I kind of equate that to, it's more important that we communicate than we see. Right. And so communication is really, really important. And so signaling is just the intent of something. Right. And so you can kind of think the same thing of your smart contract. It's the intent of the person that holds the keys to whoever's making that transaction call, their intent or their assertion based on the rules that you put into the contract. And so, that's kind of what we kind of think of as smart contracts. And so why Simba works for us is it allows you not only to build out that smart contract, but a lot of times, if you're familiar with on-chain data, it's expensive, right? You don't put a lot of data on chain. It's just way too expensive to put a big set of data on chain, unless maybe you're using Bitcoin Cash or something. But anyway, generally speaking, you just put an index, right? You just put a hashed index or a pointer to that data set. And so we allow you to do that pretty easily. We call it a data bundle, but we run it through SHA-256, put that hashed index up on chain, and then allow you to put that actual source data set either off on IPFS, on Ceph volume, really anywhere you want to put it, you can off-chain that. And then we'll generate a REST API for you so that you can start building out your front end. And you can just really kind of get your app up and running really quickly. And one of the things that we like to do at Simba is we don't want to kind of say, oh, well, we're only going to do Ethereum, or we're only going to do a particular chain. So we try to stay as agnostic as possible. We support several chains right now. We're going to do the Ethereum one. That's, generally speaking, that's the one that people mostly gravitate to. But we also have Quorum RSK, which is pegged back to Bitcoin with the Ethereum virtual machine on top. Stellar, which is more like Bitcoin, where it's not really a Turing virtual machine or Turing complete machine. It's more of like 16 actual transaction calls or operation calls that you can call, opcodes that you can call, that will allow you to make those state changes to the ledger. But it isn't actually a computer per se. So anyway, let's go in and take a look. Let's just see, I'm telling you this stuff, but you're like, holy cow, man, you're telling me in 15 minutes you're going to build an app? Yeah, man, check this out. So I'm going to go out here to app.simbachain.com. You guys can all do this. If you send us an email and just let us know that you're part of the Wyoming hackathon, we'll go ahead and get your account upgraded so there won't be so many limits to like the number of transactions that you can have and things like that. So just let us know that you're part of the hackathon, and we'll go ahead and get you set up. So first things first, once you get logged in here, I actually work with the local college, IUPUI. I'm in Indianapolis. It's Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. So I'm working with some students there. But anyway, let's go in and take a look. We'll go to a different organization. We'll switch our organization out. I don't want anybody peeking under the covers of what their students are doing. But we'll go here to, let's go to, oops. So my organization that I'll go to is the webinar organization. So let me go into that one. And when I go into my webinar organization, one of the things that I want to show you is we do have the easy interaction here for you to basically do everything that you need in order to kind of build out a smart contract, right? So you need a wallet, you need a smart contract, and then you want to build the app on top of it. So we can do all that from within this little web-based API. We call it our .com tool. But you can manage up here. You can go in and you can obviously create the organization, which I was just showing you. But in your wallets, this is where you can go into your Ethereum wallet. You can generate a standard Web3 based wallet, and then you can also fund it. We have interfaces to all the standard faucets for all of the blockchains that we support. So you can go in and fund, for instance, a Circle of Life or Ethereum mainnet or Quorum or Covan or whatever you want to use. We're going to use Circle of Life now. That sounds very cohesive to the name Simba. So Circle of Life actually is going to be our test network that we provide to all Simba chain customers to be able to use as a sandbox. So you don't have to use a Ganache or something like that. Or an Ethereum node. So you can kind of eliminate that. We'll take care of that for you. And then with that being said, you can then go ahead and just deposit. Or if you use one of the test networks, Rinkerby, Ropsten, whatever, you can go ahead and do the same. So again, this is going to be your wallet management. And after that, you're going to go over here into your smart contract section. And as I said before, here's where you're going to build out your logic, right? So let's take a look at this one. This one's kind of fun. It's MRE chain. So let's go ahead and just take a look at what would happen if we wanted to track and trace what Marines were eating in their MREs. Holy cow, that's pretty important, right? So let's say, for instance, if I'm a Tabasco supplier, I'm going to be supplying to an MRE manufacturer. That's going to go into an MRE shipment, to a carrier, to a logistics depot, and then I have Marines and sailors and soldiers that are going to go ahead and retrieve those items from those logistics depots. So I have all of these transactions that I can build out, and check this out. This is the nice thing, is if I go out here and I just create a smart contract. So let me quit this smart contract right here. If I go out here and I create a smart contract from scratch, all I have to do is just say, hey, I want to create a new asset. And let's say that I want to create a new asset that's going to keep track of cattle, right? And so we've all heard of beef chain, I'm sure. So let's go ahead and say we're going to keep track of some cattle. Well, what's important that we keep track of that cattle? Well, let's say that there's going to be a cattle, an identifier, so a CID, cattle ID. And then let's say that that's going to be a string value that we're going to apply. And then we're going to also add in all these other data primitives. But we can go in here and we can define what we're going to keep on chain as data primitives for identifying that particular asset. And then anytime that those states change to that asset, that's going to be a transaction. And so let's say, for instance, if the cattle is fed, feeding, so then if the cattle is feeding and there's sensors maybe on the cattle that can sense that that cattle is actually feeding, it's in the feeding trough area, it's sensing that it's doing that, then we can add that transaction. We can say, okay, then this is going to be, so here we go. We're going to have that feeding relationship for that cattle, and then we can go ahead and define what did the cattle eat during that feeding time, right? So, they were fed these vitamins, this grain, whatever, right? So now we have insight into what's happening with that cow. Holy cow, that's amazing. And so we can start building out this workflow, right? And so, we could give this to Councilman Lindelman and he could build this out. He doesn't need to know Solidity. He could go in here and say, okay, I understand the workflow of cattle and I could build this out. I can build out this workflow and I know what this is going to look like, right? And so he can do this. He knows this workflow better than any developer is going to know this workflow. But the nice thing is behind the scenes, well, what's happening is if you go under and just peek under the covers, look at what's happening. We're building this code. The code's auto-generating, and it's more like a what you see is what you get, Visio-esque kind of feel. But you're not going to run to production with this code, right? But what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to build out that proof of concept that you guys all want to build for this hackathon. So here you go. You got your code. Now you can start, giving this to your coders and your hackers or whatever, that people are actually going to focus on that code and really start looking at what do we have to do to make sure that this meets spec, right? It meets muster. We're not going to have security vulnerabilities, things like that. All right, so now once we've done that and we've built out our smart contract, so let's just go back out here and let's take a look at a simple smart contract. This is one of Joel Knighting. He's one of he's our CEO. He's an amazing guy. He does a really great video on this. I encourage you all to go out to our YouTube channel and take a look at it. But this talks about cost insurance freight. Very complex methodology that's going on in a particular workflow where we have to look at what's happening when we have freight and we have a shipper, we have a load board, we have a carrier, a broker, we have a bank, we have people that have to get paid as shipments are occurring, and the product is being sent from a seller supplier and being sent to a buyer through a purchase order. And so what are all the things that are involved throughout that process? And so this is that incomplete workflow. So as a coder, you don't probably know that workflow, but as a business professional, you do. So what we try to do at Simba is marry that gap, right? We're bridging that gap so that it's going to be easier for that handoff, so that when you go with your functional requirements, not only are you going with just your spec sheets, but you're going with an actual proof of concept that's somewhat functional, and some base code, right? So with that being said, so now you see that okay, so we have a carrier here. If we go in and look at the parameters for the carrier, we see all these parameters. And then here, notice the bundle hash. Look, it's just a string. It's just that index that we ran through SHA-256. And then the data is going to be off chain, right? So that's where we put, big data pieces off chain. Anyway, so that's how you do that. And then you just say, hey, it's off chain storage. Pretty easy interface. And then you can set that up. All right, so then now we're ready to build an app on top of this. So then if we come up here into application, what you're able to do is you can say, hey, okay, I want to build an app that's going to be based on the logic that I just created in that little WYSIWYG. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, I want to build this on Ethereum. All right, I'm going to build it on Circle of Life, which was the one that we were just talking about, which is kind of test network. And then where am I going to put my off-chain data? So IPFS, if you're not familiar with IPFS, it's just off-chain storage. It's where there's a lot of little pieces that we kind of put together. But anyway, that's what that is. And so we'll do that. And then we have to sell, well, which smart contract? So I can say, hey, I want to use that cost insurance freight smart contract. And then I can say, okay, well, we're going to generate, this is what the app is telling me. It's saying, you're telling me that you want us to go ahead and use that smart contract. And what Simba is going to do is we're going to generate an API for you that's going to be whatever name you want to call this. So if I say this is cost insurance freight, so there it is, cost insure freight. And so what it's going to do is it's going to generate this endpoint right here. Check this out. That is it right there. So that's an HTTPS endpoint that you're going to be able to interact with, and you're going to be able to send puts and gets to and do your post to those endpoint right there, and it's going to generate it for you. We're going to build that out for you and expose that logic, right? So here we're going to go ahead and unlock this with your smart contract, and then you got to, since we're writing this to the Ethereum blockchain, we got to go ahead and unlock our wallets that we funded earlier. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I can just deploy this. So say, hey, I want to deploy that smart contract. And it's doing it. It's processing this logic. It's signing the smart contract. It's building it, and it's generating it, and it's putting it out there so that you can go ahead and start working with it. And so what do you mean like that? What does that mean? Well, check this out. All right, so we're starting to run out of time, so I apologize for that. But all right, so let's I don't want to wait for that one to finish, but let's go out here. I know I've done this more than once, so let's look at this one. Here we go, cost insurance freight. So here it is, it's built out. So what do I have? Well, I have a bunch of stuff. Well, first of all, I have just the app info, right? So this is telling me it was built on Circle of Life. It's got, you know, it's got this configuration key information, which I can use this in Azure in order to identify this application and then like query it and stuff, which is really awesome. But anyway, then also you can do this. So let's go back here. So then you can also come in here and you can just start working with this, right? So like, let's say that was Counselor Lindelman. Sorry if I mispronounced your name, sir. But let's say that was him. And he said, hey, I just built this out and it was keeping track of my cattle and all this kind of stuff. And I want to see how it works. Well, here it is. All he's got to do is come in here and unlock his wallet. And then he's got this application that's got page controls here, right? He can start adding in, you know, this is an ASN number, but say it's a new cattle or whatever it is that he built out in his workflow. And then he can start calling these transactions. And over here on the right-hand side, look, this guys, this is what you're looking at, you know, from a blockchain standpoint. You know, you're going to be looking at, you know, what's my block hash? This is the raw data, right? So this is the raw data. Like for instance, this is when we deploy the contract. So this is when it got compiled down to bytecode, right? So that it could run in EWASM or whatever, right? So or run in the EVM. So anyway, that's what we see there. And so you get interaction with the, you know, with the raw data there. But then you can also look at these method calls, and like I said, you can just go in here and just, you know, start interacting with this smart contract. Any of the things that you wanted to do. But you know, as a developer, you guys are probably like, well, okay, yeah, but that looks like crap, and I'm not going to win anything with something not that polished. So fine, no problem. So check this out. If we go back up here and you take a look at this, so let me show you here. So if I go back here and I look at my API keys in my Simba API, well, remember we generated an API based on the logic that you put into your code. So here I can come in and just generate API keys to allow you to get into this. So here I can just copy this key and then use that key in my application. So let me show you again. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit here, so I apologize. I'm starting to run out of time. But back here in my application, when I use this in my API key, this is just Swagger. So most of you probably know what that is if you're a developer. So you just come in here, you authorize your API key that you just generated. After you do that, ta-da, now I can come in here and I can do get calls to that smart contract, right? So I can just say, hey, you know, I want to do a get call to that smart contract, try it out, and then just execute it. And then here is going to be, okay, here's what the code gets generated. So here's your curl request. Here's where it gets sent to. There was that exposed API. Here was the response, the 200 return code of the data that you sent for requesting. So there's your raw data. So anyway, there it is. It's all exposed there. You can work with it, and you're good. So 1 minute for questions. Holy cow, man. I hope I got a lot in there. I know you guys probably have a lot of questions, so let me throw that up there for you. So you can go out to our documentation page, go out to simbachain.com. Go into our menu, you'll find our documentation page. There's a build your own app. There's a car demo out there. Check it out. You can also send me some questions directly. There's my email address. I really appreciate your time, guys. This is my second year with the Wyoming Hackathon, and I really enjoy it. So I hope you guys have learned a lot. If you have any questions while you're getting started and working on your projects, we hope you use SimbaChain for your tooling, and let us know if we can help you. Thanks a lot, guys.